Hello and welcome. I'm Chad Kay, and I'll be talking today about the history of paper. Each week, I will speak on a different topic. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with interesting facts about various things, with peaceful, relaxing music in the background. The goal is to help you relax and drift off into a meditative state, or to help you drift off to sleep after a busy day. So find a comfortable spot or lie down. Close your eyes if you want, and lose yourself in these relaxing facts. The history of paper. We use paper every day, but do you know the background of how a centuries-old process gave us what we know today as paper? The first form of writing sheet was papyrus in Egypt, but the first true paper-making process was in China during the Eastern Han period, which was 25 to 220 AD. This plant-based mixture was used for writing, drawing, and money. During the 8th century, Chinese paper making spread to the Islamic world, replacing papyrus. By the 11th century, paper making was brought to Europe, where it replaced animal skin-based parchment and wood panels. By the 13th century, paper making was refined with paper mills using water wheels in Spain. Later improvements to the paper-making process came in 19th century Europe with the invention of wood-based papers. Although there were precursors such as papyrus in the Mediterranean world and amate in the pre-Columbian Americas, these are not considered true paper, nor is true parchment considered paper. Used for writing, parchment is heavily prepared animal skin that predates paper and possibly papyrus. In the 20th century, with the advent of plastic manufacture, some plastic, so-called paper, was introduced, as well as paper-plastic laminates, paper-metal laminates, and papers infused or coated with different substances to produce special properties. The word paper comes from papyrus, ancient Greek for the Cyperus papyrus plant. Papyrus is a thick, paper-like material produced from the pith of the Cyperus papyrus plant, which was used in ancient Egypt and other Mediterranean societies for writing long before paper was used in China. Papyrus is prepared by cutting off thin, ribbon-like strips of the interior of the Cyperus papyrus plant and then laying out the strips side by side to make a sheet. A second layer is then placed on top, with the strips running perpendicular to the first. The two layers are pounded together using a mallet to make a sheet. The result is very strong, but has an uneven surface, especially at the edges of the strips. When used in scrolls, repeated rolling and unrolling causes the strips to come apart again, typically along vertical lines. This effect can be seen in many ancient papyrus documents. By the end of the 9th century, paper had become more popular than papyrus in the Muslim world. In Asia and Africa, paper became the primary writing material by the mid-10th century. In Europe, papyrus coexisted with parchment for several hundred years until it largely disappeared by the 11th century. According to Timothy Hugh Barrett, paper played a pivotal role in early Chinese written culture, and a, quote, strong reading culture seems to have developed quickly after its introduction, despite political fragmentation, end quote. The introduction of paper had enormous consequences for the book world. It meant books would no longer have to be circulated in small sections or bundles, but in their entirety. Books could now be carried by hand rather than transported by cart. As a result, individual collections of literary works increased in the following centuries. The oldest known paper document in Europe is the Mozarab Missal of Silos from the 11th century, probably using paper made in the Islamic part of the Iberian Peninsula. They used hemp and linen rags as a source of fiber. The first recorded paper mill in the Iberian Peninsula was in Zátiva in 1056. Papermaking reached Europe as early as 1085 in Toledo and was firmly established in Zátiva, Spain by 1150. During the 13th century, mills were established in Italy by 1340. Papermaking then spread further northwards, with evidence of paper being made in France by 1348. In Holland, sometime around 1340 to 1350. And in Germany by 1390, in a mill set up by Ullmann Stromer. This was just about the time when the woodcut printmaking technique was transferred from fabric to paper in the old master print and popular prints. There was a paper mill in Switzerland by 1432, and the first mill in England was set up by John Tate around 1490 near Hertford. But the first commercially successful paper mill in Britain did not occur before 1588, when John Spilman set up a mill near Dartford in Kent. During this time, papermaking spread to Austria by 1469, to Russia by 1576, to the Netherlands by 1586, and to Sweden by 1612. In the Americas, archaeological evidence indicates that a similar bark paper writing material was used by the Maya no later than the 5th century AD. Called amati or amate, it was in widespread use among Mesoamerican cultures until the Spanish conquest. The earliest sample of amate was found near the Magdalena municipality in Jalisco, Mexico, belonging to the Shaft tomb culture. It is dated to 75 BC. Although cheaper than vellum, paper remained expensive, at least in book-sized quantities, through the centuries, until the advent of steam-driven paper-making machines in the 19th century, which could make paper with fibers from wood pulp. Nicolas Louis Robert of France was granted a patent for a continuous paper-making machine in 1799. At the time, he was working for Leger Didot, with whom he argued over the ownership of the invention. Didot sent his brother-in-law, John Gamble, to meet Seeley and Henry Fourdrinier, stationers of London, who agreed to finance the project. Gamble was granted British patent number 2487 on October 20th, 1801. With the help of Brian Duncan, a skilled mechanic, an improved version of the Robert original was installed at Frogmore Paper Mill in Hertfordshire in 1803, followed by another in 1804. A third machine was installed at the Fourdriniers' own mill at Two Waters. The Fourdriniers also bought a mill at St. Neots, intending to install 2 machines there, and the process and machines continued to develop. However, experiments with wood showed no real results in the late 18th century and at the start of the 19th century. By 1800, Matthias Coops in London, England, further investigated the idea of using wood to make paper, and in 1801, he wrote and published a book titled Historical Account of the Substances which have been used to describe events and to convey ideas from the earliest date to the invention of paper. His book was printed on paper made from wood shavings. No pages were fabricated using the pulping method from either rags or wood. He received financial support from the royal family to make his printing machines and acquire the materials and infrastructure needed to start his printing business. But his enterprise was short-lived. Only a few years following his first and only printed book, the one that he wrote and printed, he went bankrupt. The book was very well done. It was strong and had a fine appearance, but it was very costly. The American paper industry began with the establishment of the first paper mill in British America in 1690 by William Rittenhouse of Philadelphia, with the help of Pennsylvania's first printer, William Bradford. For 2 decades, it would remain the only mill in the colonies, and for the next 2 centuries, the city would remain the preeminent center of paper manufacturing and publishing. The first paper mills relied solely on rag paper production, with cotton rags generally imported from Europe. However, by the mid-19th century, the sulfite process had begun to proliferate in other regions with better access to wood pulp. And by 1880, America had become the largest producer of paper goods in the world, while the Delaware Valley remained an important region in paper production and publishing through the late 19th century. Philadelphia was overtaken by regions using these new processes, which had greater access to water power and wood pulp. Okay, this concludes my talk this week about the history of paper. If you have enjoyed this edition of Relaxing Facts, then please subscribe to this podcast I hope you have a wonderful day, whether you are de-stressing from the day's events or if you're just passing the time by listening. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. This is Chad K, and I'll see you next time. Take care.